You're listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. Join us as we explore new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. And now here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
We think we need to fight for peace. We take our anger and push against others who hold different views, different perspectives. We use the language of anti-this or anti-that. We use the word resist, and we spend our energy gathering ourselves against others. There's a delicate balance between resistance, fighting for what's right, and using our energy to be fundamentally creative in order to create a true New World Order. A New World Order where compassion and unity rules. The shift we are experiencing on the planet right now is creating in us deeply polarized perspectives, and it's easy to fall into a mindset of right and wrong, black and white, masculine and feminine. But what we've learned from the past is that anytime we create othering of each other, we are at risk for dehumanizing each other. And history has shown us again and again that when we dehumanize a set of people, it becomes too easy to justify marginalizing them, or even worse, hurting them or attempting to wipe them from the face of the planet. It's a slippery slope. And no matter what your perspective, we are all collectively vulnerable to sliding down that slope. Again, history shows us that normal people like you and me bought into ideals and perspectives, albeit oftentimes out of fear, that dehumanized a group of people. And that dehumanization created terrible suffering on the planet. If you looked at an X-ray of a person, or look at their blood cells under a microscope, you wouldn't know if that person is a racist or African American, if they were Christian or Jewish or Muslim. You wouldn't know their gender preference or if they are vegetarian or even a meat eater. Underneath our skin, we're more alike than different. If we're going to create a world where compassion rules, we cannot fight each other in an epic battle of perceived right and wrong. Yes, we have to take action. Love is a verb, and we have to disallow acts that are morally and ethically wrong and unacceptable in the name of love. But how do we create a new world order of love and compassion? How do we take right action and not continue to trigger polarized consciousness? Please enjoy this powerful and vital quantum conversation with Carla Goldstein as we discuss how to take fearless action in times of shift and disruption. Hi, and welcome to Quantum Conversations. I'm Karen Curry Parker, and I'm talking today with Carla Goldstein. Carla is a lawyer who is also Omega Institute's Chief External Affairs Officer and co-founder of the Omega Women's Leadership Center. As an attorney with 25 years of experience in public interest advocacy, she's contributed to more than 100 city, state, and federal laws and has worked extensively in city and state government on issues related to women's rights, poverty, public health, and social justice. She now teaches a variety of workshops at Omega, including Omega's Women and Power Conferences and Retreats, which inspire thousands of women from around the world. Carla Goldstein also appears regularly on local and national TV and radio. She makes public presentations on issues related to women's empowerment, holistic and sustainable living, activism, and spiritual activism. She's also a TEDx speaker, and she shared her perspective on feminism and spiritual activism in her TED Talk called Creating the Age of Aquarius. She's also part of a powerful brand new Indiegogo campaign to host an event called Being Fearless, Taking Action in Times of Disruption. And as part of this campaign, she's actually part of opening up this powerful dialogue in this time of disruption, that's a good word, and giving people information on how they can feel empowered, impactful, and capable of making a change when they don't know what to do. So the timeliness of this conversation, Carla, is just really mind-blowing. You and I had spoke originally at the beginning of the summer, and it's 2017 if you're listening to this later, and certainly in America we've had some significant and I think frightening disruption. What do you think is going on?
Well, I really think that what's going on is we're reaping and living in the consequences of seeds of racism that were planted and built into the soil of the country at its outset. And depending on where you sit on the spectrum of privilege and oppression, you're experiencing what's happening now differently, I think. So I guess I have to bounce the question back to you when you say what's happening. There's so much happening now. So I'm making an assumption that you're talking a little bit about what's going on, what happened in Charlottesville, and sort of the rise that we see of white nationalism. But you could be talking about so many things because there's a lot happening. Well, let's get more specific.
Absolutely. And I think, frankly, that the last year since the election of Trump has been, I think, pretty shattering for a lot of people who I think would consider themselves to be people who are not racist, or people who would consider themselves to be feminists and socially active. And now we've had this huge, I think, disruption in what felt like perhaps forward momentum and progressiveness. And there's a backlash, and a violent backlash, to what's been transpiring on the streets of America, and I think on the news, I guess the news feed of America, so we don't really have newspapers per se anymore. The point that I really want to get to, that I really want to draw out for you, and is really actually based on long conversations that have been happening kind of violently at my dinner table every Friday night with my children. I have several adult children. 7 adult children. And their response to this time has been, I would say, violent, maybe emotionally violent, and certainly even some of the actions that they have taken have been violent. A couple of my children are involved in the Antifa movement. They are watching what's happening. They are hitting the streets, and they're angry. And they're really, really angry. And when I watched your TED Talk, you talked about feeling that sort of social activism anger, and realizing that maybe that perhaps wasn't the most aligned place for you to be coming from in terms of taking action and making social change. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming more spiritually active as part of your activism protocol?
Well, it is interesting that the times that are changing. And the TED Talk, of course, I did before the election. And it's been really challenging me, this concept that I spoke about in the talk, as we're facing these times. So I have thought a lot about it. So let me say, the first thing is that I am a child of the 60s. I grew up with parents who were very involved in the civil rights movement and the human rights, environmental, women's movement. So my orientation is very much about, people acting together can right the wrongs and can build a more just society. And I've done that in my own way. I became a lawyer. I worked in public policy. I've sort of been working inside the system, trying to make what critics would, like your kids, would call, incremental change, too slow, incremental, working within the system rather than totally reforming and revolutionizing the systems that keep us in many ways stuck structurally, creating and reinforcing structural racism, poverty, and separation. And so for me, as I went along working in this way of trying to make change by working with the system that I was working on women's rights and on reproductive rights, which is probably one of the most polarized and polarizing issues of our time. And I was working for Planned Parenthood, and I just kept feeling that there was something stuck in the way that we human beings were going about trying to solve this problem. And at the same time that I was having this personal experience of like, wow, it's so, the debate is so violent, the effort is so hard, the walls are so impenetrable. At that exact same time, I myself had a personal illness. And in order to deal with my own illness, I had to kind of just reorient myself to everything. And in that reorientation, I got a taste of what it means to take walls down and accept and receive love from wherever it comes, and and to take my own defenses down. I guess that would be the best way to explain my own personal experience, was bringing my walls and defenses down. And in the process of bringing my own walls and defenses down, I was able to see how difficult it is for us human beings trying to solve problems together, trying to live together in more improved ways, that we've kind of locked ourselves in. We lock ourselves in from the get-go in terms of very quickly categorizing each other, putting each other in boxes of otherness, like you are not part of my tribe, you are not part of my community, you are somebody that I instantly feel opposed to, and therefore I am going to put up my embattled defenses against you. And so as a person who believes so firmly, like to the absolutely bottom core of my being, in women's rights and equality for everybody, that racism is absolutely something that is it corrodes humanity. Like that, we have to find ways to overcome racism. So given all of my own personal, very strongly held views, how do I stand in relationship to those values, and not in my own process of fighting for them, recreate the same kind of pain of otherness and of violence that I want to see go away? That's sort of the conundrum, that like, how do we do it? It's the paradox. And I think that what we've seen in this latest chapter of the president talking about all sides, and everybody saying, wait a minute, you can't have violence erupting from all sides here when you have white nationalists on one side and protesters on another, that's not an accurate way to talk about it. And you have the ACLU and other First Amendment defenders saying, wait a minute, we have to parse this out more carefully, this question of free speech. That in that context, it's challenging those of us who say, it's really important to build bridges to each other. It's really important to understand where somebody else is coming from. How do you hold, to me, the question that we all need to grapple with, and I have to say right off the bat, I don't have the answer. The question is, how do we hold clarity and discernment about what is morally and ethically wrong and repugnant and unacceptable? And it's the behavior that's unacceptable. And at the same time, stay open and connected and in recognition of other people's humanity. And several years ago, I took a trip to Rwanda, and there was a conference, a global women's conference there, where they were bringing women leaders from around the world to use Rwanda as a learning example of how did the genocide happen there, and what role women have had post-genocide in helping the country heal and in leading the country, because so many men were killed. Actually, women were forced to step into leadership roles, and they have the statistics, of all the countries in the world, they have some of the most advanced statistics of the numbers of women in leadership roles in government and in business. And the thing that I really took away from that trip, and they have a very powerful museum, which not only tells the story of the Rwandan genocide, but importantly, draws the connection between several of the major genocides that the world has seen. And the museum very powerfully illustrates that it is when a culture begins to dehumanize a set of people that you come you come up to the edge of being able to cross that line and have one set of people very violently trying to obliterate another set of people. And so that to me is like, it's the question, how do we hold each other's humanity, hold out hope for each other, and at the same time be able to draw a line and say, this is not acceptable. Before the election, for me, when I gave the talk and I was giving an example of my own struggling with this in the abortion rights context, and more recently in the immigrants' rights context, I have been, I'm challenged. I'm sitting right there with every, other people sort of scratching their head about what do we need to do? And what I can say, I guess, with some sense of certainty is closing our hearts is not what we should do. And meeting violence with violence, I think, is not what we should do. But I do think that we have to meet angry hearts, hateful hearts, and violence with loving, outraged resistance. And what I mean by that, I read an essay once by a Buddhist woman, and I can't remember her name, where she made the distinction between raw rage and outrage. And raw rage is just, anger that can take any form of violence. It's just unchanneled, untapped, untethered. And outrage, she was making the case, is rage plus love. Rage plus love. You can be outraged. You can say, this is not right. And you can take action and should take action to stop it and to be in concert with other people who want to stop it, who are also outraged. But when you put love with it, it creates a space enough to come out of, primal brain, of flight or fight, of that fearful reactivity that says run, flee, or shut it down through violence. And that space is the space, I think, we who want to work on, transforming what humanity looks like, and we do that by transforming ourselves, our relationships and systems and structures. We need to keep working in that space. To me, that's the place of possibility. It's the place of possibility when we create a seeing, an opportunity for holding each other and the gaps in understanding that we have, with a reverence for what humanity can be, but a discernment and a clarity of what we will not tolerate.
Beautifully said. I keep hearkening back to what is love, because I think that's a really important conversation that we need to all also be having, because what I watch in the community that I serve, I watch people who are holding space and meditating and, are not watching the news sometimes, or are really turning away from the story of what's up on the planet because they don't like the energy and they don't like the vibration. And I keep saying, love is a verb. It's not just holding a space. When you're a parent and your child goes out and does something they're not supposed to do, they violate somebody else's rights, you reel that kid back in and show them, hey, this is where the boundary is. That's the most loving thing you can do as a parent. If you turn your head the other way, you're not contributing to that child's sense of capability or his or her capacity to serve the world in a morally or ethically aligned way. So it's not so wrong, I think, to say, okay, as you said, okay, here's the line, and let's hold this line in a loving way. Here's the thing that I keep also hearing coming up for people is there's also this sense of, well, but what can I do about it? This isn't me. I'm not racist. I'm not, anti-feminist. I want to help people from Syria. I want to make the world a better place, but I don't even know where to begin. How do people find a place of empowerment where they can actually begin to not only hold the space, but to also find places to take action that's aligned with what they're wanting to see in the world?
Right. I think that we all have to be operating on many, many levels. And what that means is reflection on one's own biases, right? So there's the personal work to do, like, who am I? Where do I sit? Where are my biases that are embedded in me that actually, if I look closely, I can find them and I can do work on that all by myself, and nobody else can do it for me. I actually have to do it by myself. So that's one place that people can absolutely work. The second is in families. I've sat at so many tables where people talk about how the election divided their families or other people, so there's our families, our communities where we can be in conversation. I read a very powerful story in The Guardian this morning by Eve Ensler, who's the founder of V-Day, looking back on 20 years. And she was talking about when she started it and she wrote the play, The Vagina Monologues, she was certain she'd be shot if she said the word vagina. And that the opposite happened. The more she said it, the more women came forward. And it just created this global movement, the V-Day movement, to end violence. And the article is imploring people that what's needed is to speak truth of people's experience and because the second she said it, other people said, hey, me too. And in our town, I went to a vigil on the day after Charlottesville, and there were a couple hundred of people there. And it's like the second you see somebody else standing up for what's right, it makes you feel more safe. So one thing that people can definitely do is speak up wherever you are in whatever conversation and say, this is unacceptable. I think our country cannot tolerate this. We need to work together to examine and end oppression wherever we find it. And there are lots of different ways that people can do that. If you just think about sort of all the parts of us, right? So there's literally physically your feet. Where do you walk? Where do you stand? Who do you stand with? If you think about your voice, your mouth, what do you say? Who are you saying it to? Your hands, what are you writing? We live in a culture now of social media, and anybody can be a journalist. Anybody can express, and we get I think a lot of challenges, the ricochet of like, what's fake news and who can I trust? But abandoning it and sticking your head in the sand is not helpful. And so finding the best sources of news. And when you find one, you say, hey, let me share this. This is a valid, really important piece. Please read it. Here's why. Or write a piece yourself. Here's what's happening in my community. I have somebody in my office who said to me the other day, I'm going to be late. I'm very sorry. And I was like, oh, what's up? And it turns out this person was taking an immigrant to a healthcare appointment because, she was looking out for her neighbor who was in jeopardy of risking their status because of where they live. And she wanted to make sure this person was being taken care of, even though they didn't have health insurance and this and that and the other. And I was so moved by that. I'm like, wow, somebody who is going to take time from their job to help a neighbor in that kind of way. And there are so many ways we can reach out to people in our own communities to help them feel connected, to help ourselves feel connected, to help ourselves feel more safe, other people feel more safe. So I think there's a lot to do. There are a lot of organizations also, depending on, each of us has different gifts, different talents, different concerns and inclinations. And it just doesn't take very long. You just scratch the surface of information about what you're drawn to, what you want to help. And either, go where I think the best thing to do is go where there's already a lot of activity. You don't have to spend your time inventing something because others have thought it through and organized and have ways to participate. Or if you're a person who's got this incredible creative energy and you want to invent something that's new and different and a liberating activity, like go for it because now's, it's a good time. It's a good time to do it. So I think there's a lot that people can do. And the most challenging thing is to calm the mind enough from one's own fear that it's overwhelming, and that therefore, since it's overwhelming, I'm just going to not do anything.
Yeah, very important point, I think. So you talked just briefly about being afraid because you don't know what to do. Can we talk for just one short minute about the fear and any ideas or thoughts that you have around helping people manage the fear? Because the other thing that I really hear is not just disempowerment or feeling disempowered, and overwhelmed with what can I do, but I hear people are genuinely afraid. I live in a Jewish neighborhood. My daughter goes to a Jewish day school. My middle daughter was home 2 weeks ago. She's an art student. She went over to the local Jewish grocery store and was taking photographs of the grocery store, and the owner came running out after her, taking photographs of her, and called the police on her, which, was a very upsetting experience for everybody involved. And we understood all sides of the story there. But what can people do with the fear so that they can feel more empowered and capable of not just making change, but also find ways to feel safe in this disruptive time?
Well, that's where I do think sort of personal practice and community really come in. And personal practice, what I mean by that is, the whole range of self-soothing, calming, grounding practices of being in your body, working with your breath, walking, exercise. We are biological beings, and fear is a biological response. So I think we have to physically work with ourselves to manage our fear. And fear is also not all bad. Fear is a part of our emotional intelligence. And so the question is how to discern our fear. Is that fear that I'm having in the middle of the night, is that real? Is that justified? Am I getting carried away? And when the fear is real and it is justified and you're not getting carried away, what are the smartest things you can do to protect yourself, to protect other people? And being able to, discern between those two things, I think, is very critical. And also, I do think at times, at certain times, you have to ask yourself, what kind of risk do I want to take on for myself, for my family? And I do think that part of what's happening now is that communities who have been more at risk are saying, hey, white people, people of privilege, this has been our reality. Can we distribute the risk a little bit here? Can your community take some risk to help protect all of us? Because we've been facing this for a long time, and I do think that is a big part of the conversation on race and racism, and safety and not safety, and what's going on with who are the police protecting and who are they not protecting, and what does it mean to be safe? So I think it's really a challenge. I was talking to a friend of mine who spent a good deal of time in Turkey, and she's African American, and one of her parents had been worried about her while she was in Turkey because there was an explosion nearby. And she said, frankly, I actually feel safer in Turkey I'm not targeted because of the color of my skin like I am in America. And these notions of who's safe, who's keeping us safe, are really big things we need to tackle. And it connects very directly also to our military, to notions of terrorism, who are the terrorists, who's at danger, what are we doing, what are we doing with our country's resources in terms of whose terror are we creating by what we're doing in other countries? So it's a huge, huge, vast question about fear and safety. And the place to start, from my perspective, is discerning where is danger really? What danger am I going to take on by taking risks so that I can create safety for myself and for others? And when am I just getting carried away and letting my fear paralyze me and keep me from taking important actions that actually can lend to building community, that can lend to creating safety, that can, instead of being the bystander, be the upstander or the standing with.
If you want to learn more about Carla's work, you can visit eomega.org and get more information about the Omega Institute and the work that she is doing there. And tell us a little bit about this Being Fearless, Taking Action in Times of Disruption Indiegogo campaign that you've got going on.
Oh, thank you. So October 13th through 15th on our campus in Rhinebeck, New York, we're having a conference, a 3-day conference of some extraordinary leaders who are going to be taking on all the issues that we're talking about. Bill Moyers will be there, Van Jones, Amy Goodman, Sister Joan Chittister, John Kabat-Zinn, who's, sort of the father of the mindfulness movement, really grappling with the kinds of questions that we're asking, which is, how do we take what we've learned over all these years of psychological development, spiritual development, learning how to work with our bodies and our minds and more, be more mindful. How do we take those lessons, that wisdom, combine it with the spirit of wanting to take action and make deep change, transformational change in the way that the world works? How do we put those two things together? And the 3 days is being offered through an Indiegogo campaign at $5. People can live stream it or have it on demand for 60 days. So we're hoping to actually galvanize a global audience who are all participating in this. And, we have to hold hands with each other. That's what we have to do, whether it's virtual or, metaphorical or literally. That's the key to moving through fear. It's really, being willing to stand in it together with our hearts open, but our eyes and minds clearly discerning what we can no longer tolerate and what we will vow to transform with our beings and our community.
Absolutely beautiful. And I think that I really appreciate that you're opening us up for everyone to be a part of this. One of the things that's been so interesting and I think profound, and maybe we take this, or maybe we're getting to the point where we already take this for granted, but watching things like Charlottesville unfold or Boston unfold or Phoenix unfold on live stream on Facebook, and not being able to be there, but yet to be there in solidarity, virtually holding hands with hearts open, as you say, is so unique, I think, to this time, and so interesting from a mindfulness and from a spiritual perspective. And I think gathering people together as part of this, I think probably the most important dialogue we need to be having on this planet right now, because we've got, interpersonal issues, and we've got, planetary environmental issues that at a certain point are going to unify us, whether we like it or not. We have to figure this out. And I really appreciate you opening us up to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And what you just said is the cornerstone of the conference, which is that climate change, poverty, racism, violence, none of these things can be solved alone. Nothing lives in isolation. We now know that. And if you're going to unravel the thread, we have to take it all on. So thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carla. And thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you all for joining us for another Quantum Conversation. We have to build bridges to each other instead of burning down the bridges that connect us in the name of being right or righteous. The challenges facing the world will ultimately impact all of us. Nature is a great equalizer, and as we've seen, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and such are equal opportunity destroyers. We're all in this together, and if we have to hold hands together to make this world the abundant and compassionate place that we know it can be, we have to figure out how to maintain or build bridges to each other. Yes, we have to be clear and we have to be discerning. We have to take strong stands against moral and ethical wrongs and unacceptable behavior. And yes, it's okay to be outraged. Your outrage is a response to boundary violations and our inner moral compass sharing with us that things are out of alignment with truth. Use your outrage to create real change. Find those places where you feel aligned and commit your manifested self to taking action, whether it's through writing letters, contacting your political leaders, feeding the hungry, creating shelter for others, donating money. Do something, even if it's hard or uncomfortable. We cannot hide our eyes and turn away from what's happening on the planet. This is a deep spiritual truth. The manifested world is our collective consciousness made manifest. What is happening on the planet is part of us. We are here in bodies for a reason. It is the physical that is the vehicle for the soul. Your soul moves through your physical actions to make manifest a world of compassion. And if we don't like what we see, we have to speak up. We have to hold hands together and craft different solutions and revolutionary answers. We also have to stay open, connected, and find those places where we are aligned with each other. And we have to see the brilliance and beauty of ourselves first, to see the value of who we are so that we can begin to see the brilliance, the beauty, and the value of others. To see that each and every one of us holds a unique and vital place in the cosmos. Recently, I surveyed my listeners and I asked them what they loved most about human design. I thought they would tell me things like human design helped them get healthier, make more money, have better relationships, etc. The answers to my survey surprised me. Well, I guess most people said that human design was powerful and life-changing. The biggest gift that people received from knowing human design was that not only did they learn to love themselves, they started to be able to love and accept others in a much more deep and honoring way. They started to love their family and friends better and became more compassionate and understanding of their loved ones and the world around them. I think we need a lot more of that. And I don't care what your path is to waking up to that level of love. If you'd like to learn more about your human design or the human designs of your loved ones, please visit our Quantum Conversations Facebook page or visit our website, www.quantumalignmentsystem.com, and get your free human design chart and report. This week, may you begin to see the beauty of who you truly are, and may this perspective deepen your ability to see and to act on the beauty in everyone else, because the world needs that more than anything. I'm Karen Curry Parker. Thank you for joining me for Quantum Conversations.
Thanks for listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. For more information, visit joyfulmission.com.